All right, so I'm going to call this meeting to order of the Lake Mills City Council, September 21st, 2021. If we can get a roll call.
Ms. Curler?
Here.
Mr. Waters?
Here.
Mrs. Bishop?
Here.
Ms. Quedno?
Here.
Mr. Fields?
Here.
All right. If we can all please stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Now we're going to move to item 4, which is the correction and/or approval of the City Council minutes of September 7th, 2021. Any comment or questions? Can we have a motion for approval?
I'll move approval of the minutes from the September 7th, 2021 City Council meeting.
Second.
All right. So that was a motion by Ms. Curler, second by Ms. Bishop. If we can get a quick roll call on that.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
Ms. Quedno?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
All right, thank you. Correspondence. I'll start. I did have a correspondence in the last couple of weeks on a variance cost related to compliance documentation with dealing with zoning variation. So I have not had a chance to get back to that individual, but I did have that correspondence, and that was all I had. Steve? Mr. Fields?
I just got the notice for Officer Troy's retirement party coming up, an invite to that.
Great. Ms. Curler?
I received that invitation as well, and I also received one contact regarding the Joint Rock Lake Committee priorities that we'll be discussing tonight.
Ms. Quidnow?
Nothing new.
Mrs. Bishop?
Yes, I'll go in order. I had the same correspondence as Mr. Waters with the city permitting costs. Am I turned on here? Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Everything's working. I had some correspondence about the community center use application. I had correspondence about the restriping on West Lake Street and the effect on businesses and the feeling of lack of city response or regard for that. I had communication about the bird scooters. I had communication about zoning for in-home businesses and those regulations. And then I had a correspondence about COVID and the effect on the city, and correspondence also about Joint Rock Lake priorities. I think that covers it. Okay.
All right. Any other comments related to that? All right. So move to item 6, which is public comment. The public is encouraged to address the council at this time regarding items on the agenda. Public comment may also be made at this time on items that are not on the agenda. If you've registered with the city clerk before the meeting has been called to order, the state's open meeting laws discourage action by the council on items not listed on the agenda. Please keep your comments limited to 3 minutes. and state your name and address when starting your comments and filling out the sign-in sheet provided. I didn't receive any notice of any people, or did you want to address the council?
I did, if that's all right.
Go ahead. We're good. Can you go up to the screen? There is a button to push the mic, and is there a sign-up sheet around there? Thanks, Steve.
When you're done, just hit it and it'll go red again. Sure.
Can we get the camera on that public input?
Oh. I got the mic working.
I'm certain I can turn the camera on if that's what you just needed me to do.
Go ahead.
Awesome. We're good. Thank you.
Hello, council. My name is Jason Erksleben. I live at 118 South Ferry. I believe on the agenda today was the RFP for the development at Sandy Beach. Is that correct? If I'm not mistaken. My questions, I guess the first one would be overarching really, but it's about just economic development and economic outreach. What efforts are we taking to make sure that when we produce the RFP, it is actually far reaching and we are connecting with developers who are actually well suited to perform the job? That's my first question. Really, that's more so just around Lake Mills as well as a whole. I look online and the Economic Development Committee hasn't posted notes since February of 2020. So I feel as a younger individual with a family in the community, I want to make sure that we're doing things to continue to grow the community as a whole and bring businesses to the community and make sure that our businesses that are already here. I'm also on the Main Street program. I want to make sure that the businesses are also being supported by not just the city itself, but also by a group of tourists, because truthfully, we need it. All cities need tourism. So that's the first question, is just economic development, but specifically pertaining to the development at Sandy Beach. And that wraps up together. I guess otherwise, public comment. I support the bird scooters. I think that's a fantastic idea as well. For a town that has no taxis and no Ubers, it's a great way to also produce business towards far-reaching areas like Tyranina Brewing and Dog and Shrub and Sandy Beach. Those are obviously difficult areas that you can't walk to, and so you need to have means of transportation to get to them. So I see the pros and the cons. I've lived in larger cities that have them, and I do support them. I also give you a short leash in the event that we decide that they aren't a good idea, they don't pan out, they're dangerous, and people are vandalizing them, then we take them away. But in the moment, I say, why not try it out? And then I guess back to the restaurant is one other comment, is that my understanding is we've gone back and forth about what we want, what we don't, putting restrictions on the RFP. As working in a territory of mechanical contracting, when you send out RFPs, they should be open-ended. They should allow the developers to provide their expertise so that they can make suggestions and put forth ideas that they think would be helpful. Let the professionals come to those, but obviously leave the opportunity to make decisions on the back half with discretion and decide whether or not we want to go forward with it. But at the moment, I don't think we should do anything to discriminate any types of businesses and any types of developers from coming in and developing the space. Just leave the opportunity to make changes and obviously turn down ideas in the event that we don't like them. So that's it. I don't think I get to talk about my stop sign here, do I, Steve? So thank you.
Any questions for Jason?
Yes, please.
All right. Thank you, Jason. I thought I was turning myself on, but I am on. So good. Good. City manager's report. Steve, you had a lot in there today, for this meeting. So we're going to have to limit you to 3 minutes.
That sounds good.
Now, go ahead.
The monthly budget reports for August were out. The city budget summary was included, which you'll want to have for next week. It'll be on next week's agenda again. The CMRR, we submitted that, if you remember, back in June. If you looked at this one, there's a response from the DNR at the end that tells you what they expect. And then the check registers, there's a general summary for each one included, and then the police report. Are there any questions? Running is our taxi cab service.
Thank you.
And general communications was police radios at 27,000.
Okay, thank you again. Was there any other questions? Yes, Ms. Curler.
Steve, first of all, thank you for providing that 2022 budget summary. I took a quick look at it, and as I've been starting to look through the ClearGov proposed budget, it helps me kind of, focus in on the things that are different or things that, we should particularly pay attention to. So thank you. And also thank you to Betsy and her team for those monthly voucher summaries. Same thing, it kind of helps us focus on like what are the biggest expenses. A question that I had on the August 2021 budget report on the first page, the revenues for Sandy Beach fee collection. It looks like we've actually exceeded our expectations so far for the year. And I know we had a public comment 1 or 2 meetings ago, from a citizen who was concerned that we perhaps weren't collecting the fees. So I just wondered if you could give any thoughts on that. It doesn't look like we're not getting the revenue, but yet, there was some observations that maybe it isn't always collected.
The method for collection has been in place for maybe 40 years. So the baseline is related to that. Obviously, we don't collect every fee that was possible. As we've noted before, if people walk through, our guys are told not to confront them. And there are lots of times in the beginning of the year and the end of the year when we don't have enough employees, we don't have anybody out there. So it's not like we're collecting all the fees that are possible, but we have had pretty good success collecting fees. It's the same with the boat launches. You know as well as I do, you go down to the boat launch, there's a box. And you can pay the fee or you don't have to. But a lot of people pay. The vast majority of people pay.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the city manager's report? All right, seeing none, we'll move forward with item 8, which is the acceptance of the minutes from the Public Works Board of August 10th, 2021. Any questions or comments on that? Seeing none, I will accept those minutes. City Council business, item A, discussion of the Joint Rock Lake Committee priorities. So we have a priority letter that was forwarded in minutes from the last town board meeting. Is there any comment from the staff on this?
No, we don't have any.
Okay. So you'll let the document stand as is. Any questions on these priorities or comments? Ms. Curler.
Yeah, I had asked Steve some questions earlier by email. I just wanted to share some thoughts and his response with the rest of you. My sense is that this is a group that is fairly self-directed, and they do have a purpose and responsibilities under the ordinance. But from talking with Steve, it doesn't seem like the council has historically communicated the council priorities to them or asked for an annual report out. We do get their meeting minutes, and so we do have that. couple of things that I noted that were in the city code is that they are asked to develop a long-range plan and potentially submit budget proposals, which it doesn't sound like they've done in recent years. So just kind of occurred to me that maybe there's might be helpful to create some mechanism for either giving them some goals or more formally commenting back on their priorities. But, it might require some kind of initiating some new conversations with folks. But like I said, it seems like they're very self-directed. I don't have any objection to the priorities that they're working on. But I just wondered if the council wanted to have any more of a role in engaging with them.
So in the past, I believe Mr. Fields attended some of their meetings to kind of give some feedback from the city.
Oh.
And here recently, I've attended the last couple meetings to provide some direction as well from not really direction from the council, but to give them ideas of what we're looking at and what we're working on. So to see if goals align at all. So,
Okay,
so there has been that discussion.
great. I'm glad to hear that.
Mr. President, would it make sense for the person who is on the Parks Board to attend those meetings on a more regular basis?
I think we're good with
Okay.
with the Parks Board being a separate entity and keeping this as it is at this point.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify.
I did have a concern though, as I read through the priorities. They listed the carrying capacity review as an agenda item that they wanted to put some more focus in. And the hot topic here lately has been the increasing the wake zone to 200 feet. And my concern with increasing that wake zone, which is basically taking it beyond the state law level, which the state law is 100 feet for boats and 200 feet for other vessels like your jet skis. So we would be taking it beyond the state law, and that would effectively reduce the carrying capacity because we're shortening up the usable space within the lake. So I see that those two are kind of rubbing against each other a little bit, and maybe there needs to be a review on, what's the priority? Is it getting more people on the lake and having fun and keeping that recreation zone as reasonable as possible, or do we need to reduce the wake zone or increase the wake zone? So that's the only comment I have there, that there seems to be a bit of a rub, and how does that play out? So, any other comments?
Yeah, just two brief ones. I noted in their priorities there was only 4 individuals listed, and so I think there is a vacancy on the city appointment side. Is that right?
Yes.
So that's just something that we need to fill. You'll probably be bringing somebody to us at some point.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Just one other thought on that carrying capacity, because I know that is a very hot topic, and the ordinance potentially increasing the Sloan Awake area adjacent to the shoreline. I think when you think about all the ways that boats can access the water, whether it's a waterfront owner or people using the boat landings or even people renting boat slips, they all have to be kind of factored in. And so I know the Parks Board is looking at the boat slips that the city rents out, and I just wondered if there was what's the right word? I mean, do we want some advice from the Joint Rock Lake Committee on what, does the Parks Board want to ask for some advice related to the boat slips if they're evaluating that? So I'm trying to think about what's the way for our council to ask them to work on issues. I guess I'm glad that you're attending regularly, Greg, and so you can be one way that gets communicated.
Sure.
Mr. President, I do know that the Joint Rock Lake Committee has sent quite a bit of information regarding the carrying capacity on the lake. And it is a priority of the Parks Department and the Parks Board, apologies, in looking at the relationship between how do we police that, and then how do we make sure that we are not going to
prevent people from that recreational opportunity as well, because that can be a source of revenue. So it is something worth discussing, of course, and that we would welcome anyone coming to the Parks Board meetings if they would like to discuss that. I highly recommend talking to Bill, our chairperson, and to be put on the agenda for our next Parks Board meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Any other comments? All right. So there's no action here. It's just a discussion, so we'll move forward. Item B is a discussion decision on the 2021 Clean Boats, Clean Waters, Aquatic Invasive Species Control Grant Program. So we do have a motion 21-9-2-1. Megan, can you read that?
Just to clarify, you just want the title read, correct?
That'd be great.
Directing the city manager to apply to the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources for a Clean Boat, Clean Water grant.
Thank you. All right. Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve motion 21-9-2-1.
I second.
All right, a motion by Mr. Fields, a second by Ms. Quidnow. Is there any discussion from staff?
We've been doing this for about 6 years now, 7 years. Where it's done in cooperation with the town. So the county files the grant, and then we get a portion, and the town gets a portion, and then the town runs the program. And then they bill us, and we send them the check, and then apply to the state to get our reimbursement. So it's worked out well for the last 7 years, and so we recommend going ahead and doing it again.
All right, is there any questions? Yes.
I may have missed this, so I apologize if I did. Is there a total amount that is mentioned in this grant, or is it based upon need?
It's $5,000, and it's a $1,200 local match, 12 something, which is generally done through the volunteer labor and the county's labor. So there's actually no cash output on our part. The town manages it all, so it has a very minimal amount of impact other than Betsy having to process the grant and send the money to the town when requested.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mrs. Bishop.
Mr. Wilkie, I thought you did mention that there is a cost the town ends up billing us. What does that end up being typically?
It depends on the weather a lot, but it's never hit the full $5,000 that I know of. Generally, they have a hard enough time getting the volunteers, and then between the weather and other issues, I think we've hit it like 4,400 a couple times, but most of the time it's under. And once they exceed the grant amount, then they're done. So.
Did you have follow-up on that? Nope. Yep.
No, I think I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, let's move forward with a roll call for motion 21-9-2-1.
Mrs. Bishop,
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow,
Aye.
Mr. Fields,
Aye.
Ms. Curler,
Aye.
Mr. Waters.
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
All right, thank you. Moving forward, next item on the agenda is discussion on the Bird electric scooter rental service program. There's a memo that was included in our notes. Staff, do you have comment on this?
we were approached by Bird about putting scooters, e-scooters in the city. My first question was why? But they expressed that they felt that Lake Mills would be a good area to have them. I talked it over with staff. They had some reservations, but they were kind of like Jason's comment on being willing to see what happened. Most of the places that I've seen them are college towns like Whitewater and Oshkosh or Madison or Milwaukee or bigger cities. Lake Mills is a little small in comparison to most of those without the types of activities that go along with a lot of those cities. But they were still very positive. So after the positive comment at both Main Street and department heads meeting, I thought I would turn it over to you guys to have a conversation. And if you want them to come do a presentation for you, I will invite them.
All right. Questions or comments?
I guess I have a quick question is, I guess, what would we allow them to use them on? And we got like the bike walking trail system through town. I'm sure they can't go out on the recreational trail with them. How are we going to police where some of these end up?
They do most of their own policing. As far as how they're utilized, would have to be a police department issue. That's why they come to the city right away, is to kind of work with you on the types of structures they put in place based on what you allow. So like in Lake Mills, we allow bikes on sidewalks in a lot of areas, everywhere but the downtown, actually, and on the streets. So you would have a combination of that being going on here unless you made decisions to restrict it more than that. And that would be the conversation you'd have to kind of sit down and go over with them, what they felt would work the best based on location and the areas that people were trying to go and those types of things. My experience has been that what happens is you come in and use your phone and to rent it and free it up and use it, and then it tracks it, and then you have to take a picture when you're done and that it was done right. But there's still things that, you know, where they get left and how they get left and how they were utilized in the interim that tend to be an issue. Probably the biggest one is after bar hours. So I don't know how that would work here, but it is an interesting debate that would have to be going on between you and the company, because I'm sure that they would modify the, you know, how the scooters could be used within the community based on what rules and regulations you put in place.
Ms. Curler?
I guess following up on Mr. Field's questions, I was also curious. I mean, we have an ordinance section on bicycles. And so I wondered if we were contemplating this, should we add scooters to that or create a separate one for scooters, and not to get overly burdensome, but it seems like if we don't have any regulations over scooters, then it would make it difficult for our police department to respond if there was an issue.
Well, there are actually a lot of scooters already at the community. I mean, people just buy them and use them. So I see them all over the place. I think we had one at one time. But yes, that would be something similar, I would assume. It's kind of up to you guys. We can work with you to develop a process and work with Bird to figure out, you know, what codes and types of things we need to have in place to make you guys feel comfortable. But really, it would probably be designed very similar to the bike one.
Yes, Mrs. Quidnell.
I am looking online at the Green Bay community who had just recently done Bird e-scooters. And I can tell you, based on the picture that I'm seeing, we may be thinking of this scooter concept as like one of those big Segway types of scooters, when in fact it's actually about the size of a Razor scooter. It's quite small, very portable. it does mention in their website here, or not in the Bird website, but in Green Bay's website, having to do with making sure you slow down when you go around pedestrians, should there be any. I hear what you're saying with regard to the concern of where exactly people could use this, but I see a lot of people already accessing sidewalks and those things in a safe manner. Even bicycles who are not on the road, if they're on the sidewalk, are willing to go onto the road in the time that they're needed to be. So I'm thinking that we might not be seeing too much of the concerns. My only concern would be the cost associated with, or is there a cost associated with any repairs of these things, or is that handled by the company? And how much is it going to cost us overall to have something like this in our town?
The company handles everything related to the scooters. We don't do anything. They hire all the contractors, they pick them all up, they maintain them all. The only issues we have are regulation and then enforcement.
So it's kind of like a red box of scooters?
Yes.
Sorry, did I give you a reference that was, okay.
Yeah.
Like you could go and rent it and take it back, or leave it and have it get picked up somewhere?
Yeah, you can leave it wherever you want. And you have to take a picture of it, and it's got a GPS system on it, and they have someone that'll come and pick that up sometime in the night.
Okay.
Did you have something, Mrs. Bishop?
I did have something, but I also see Jason raising his hand, so I'm going to first make a motion to suspend the rules to allow Jason Erxleben to speak on the issue momentarily.
So there's a motion. Is there a second?
I second.
So motion by Mrs. Bishop, second by Ms. Quidnow. Raise of hands. It's 5-0. Jason, you're welcome to speak. Yes.
I've got the mic.
You're good.
Thank you for the exception. I just, as a person who's used these in other towns, and I'm not sure if anyone else has, I've used them in San Francisco, I've used them in Charlotte, I've used them in Milwaukee. The towns adapt. There is much more population in those towns. There are many, many more cars driving at faster speeds. The towns adapt. The other pro I was going to say is typically the individuals who collect those are just regular citizens who are contractors who get paid by scooters individually. I don't know if they've shared that with you, if that's how they would do this, Steve. If not, but it's also another pro of job creation as well, with people in the community who collect these, take them home, charge them, and get paid by the ones to charge them. So just additional pros to those as well. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. I've also used these and seen them in much larger cities, particularly Raleigh. And while they're cool for first use, my concern is there demand here from our citizens for that? I think we need to explore that. I think we need to explore not just Bird, but there are Limes and maybe another company or two that do this. And are there other needs in our community for transportation? Again, you always have to look at the cost and what our budget will allow and compare that to the need, but maybe a trolley route with a north-south loop and an east-west loop would connect the portions that Jason mentioned, from Sandy Beach to, I always screw up the name, but the distillery and the brewery. So I think if we're going to look at increased transportation options in the city, we should consider all of those and then make a more informed decision instead of just the one company that has approached us. My other concern with seeing these and using these is that they do get left everywhere, and especially for the people more located downtown, having those end up in their yards, I think would be super frustrating for them. And again, at what cost to the city? Sure, we can put in regulations, but is that too frustrating for our citizens and not worth all of that? So those are things that I've seen with the use of these.
Can I follow up?
Sure.
Thanks.
It's all you.
I hear what you're saying, and I agree that it could be a burden, but I'm also hearing Jason say that there are citizens who are paid to go and find those things. So I like the idea that if there's a region that different people are in charge of covering those locations and get paid to do that, I would know many a teenager who would be happy to go and do that kind of thing. But I think I agree with you about the idea of exploring more than just this option. I think it's a nice idea. I think it's also very cost effective in that a trolley would take maintenance time. There would be a lot of additional costs to consider, but the idea of having other modes of transportation, perhaps we can think about different kind, like a bike or a motorized scooter, although this is a motorized scooter
Right.
anyway. So, but something that's a little bit more versatile for multiple ages. I would not imagine that a lot of elderly people would be using these kinds of things. So maybe that would be something worth considering. I'm just putting it out there. But on the other hand, I know I would use something like this because I know that it would be fun to do this as opposed to pushing it myself. That makes me sound lazy, but I understand, it has a really nice aesthetic look.
Mr. Wilkie?
I do want to make one comment in relation that this is a private company coming in and asking to do business, so we're not really regulating them or asking them to come in. If another company volunteered to come in, we would do the same thing for them. And we wouldn't, so if Bird were here and another company, I would think that they would both be able to use it under the rules that we put in place. So I don't think that I would feel comfortable in regulating it in that fashion. If you want to come on in, just follow the rules that we put in place.
Does the city get any proceeds from this usage? Because it's, of course, going to add to our responsibilities.
I have not seen anything that said we would get any money.
Okay. So I am a consumer that have used these products. I travel extensively with business, and I've seen the cities before the scooters come in and then after the scooters come in. I've used the scooters. I own a scooter. I have one now at home. So I don't know if I'm one of those elderly that would be using the scooter, but I do have one, and I do wear a helmet when I use it, and I follow the rules just like a bicycle rider, because I ride a bike a lot, and I just use the same rules when I use my scooter. But my concern with this would be safety. I've seen what happens in these cities after bar hours. I had a business associate that was actually killed on one of these. So it does hit close to the heart because of that. So the safety is a big issue. Also, kids use these products, and, are they really the right, is it right to have a motorized vehicle that the kids are using that they're really not authorized to use, but they do use anyway? We have that small town feel here in Lake Mills, and it's a very walkable town. And I would be concerned with the scooter clutter that you see. When you go into these other towns, there's scooters everywhere. And they're not in a designated area like some of these bicycle companies are. These scooters are just left throughout the town. And it does change the look of the town, and it will change the feel of Lake Mills if we allow these people to come in. So that's my feeling, and I guess that's an issue that we'll have to decide on. So any other comments, questions? Ms. Curler.
I guess I'll just weigh in that I have some reservations about it for the reasons that Mrs. Bishop and Mr. Waters shared, safety and just wanting to look more broadly at our overall transportation scheme. And I'd like to see more data, the information that we got from Steve, and there's probably more out there, but the city of Milwaukee is doing a pilot, and that they've, it's very organized and has districts and stuff. The city of Whitewater looked like they came in and then left after a very short time, so they don't have a lot of data there. But I can see a bigger city or a university setting maybe having more demand than we might have here.
All right, so should we leave it that we can follow up with Mr. Wilkie on next steps, or does that seem reasonable? All right. So let's do that from an individual standpoint. Moving forward, item D on the agenda is discussion decision on the EMS contract. So there is a motion. It's 21-9-2-2. Megan, can you read that?
Again, confirming you just want the title read.
Correct. Thank you.
Authorizing the city manager to provide notice of contract termination to the Lake Mills Emergency Medical Services.
Thank you. So there was a lot of supporting materials and memos attached to this. Staff comment?
But
Oh, wait a minute. We gotta make a motion and second it. Is there anyone that will make a motion here?
Mr. President, I'll make a motion to approve 21-9-2-2 regarding notice to terminate the EMS contract.
Is there a second?
Second.
So motion by Ms. Curler, second by Ms. Quidnow. Now, staff discussion.
We actually got our official notice Monday. That was attached to the agenda later, which actually comes in at 126% increase. So, I recommend it to you that we terminate the contract and start renegotiating based on the information that we've been provided. And I will continue to move forward as directed, but I will sit down and start negotiating and see what kind of information I can develop and if we can come to an agreement on a new contract. But I think it's important to terminate this contract now, because otherwise, once we hit that first date, then you're locked in. You're no longer allowed. Your timeline is locked, so you're at the 120 days. You can't terminate the contract, and then you have to, if you can get them to negotiate, that's fine, but they're in control then. At least if we terminate the contract, we have an option to negotiate from that point out.
All right. Any questions or discussion on this topic? Mrs. Bishop.
I have a question on that last point, Mr. Wilkie. I read the contract and it seemed like you can terminate the contract with not less than 120 days notice, but it didn't say before a certain point in time. Did I miss a section there and we have to do it before a certain date?
October 1st.
So we have to give notice by October 1st, which is 120 days before the
January 1st. Yeah.
January, December 31st is the end of the contract, so you have to give 120 days notice before that December 30th date. 31st.
But that would be September 1st.
Ooh.
Yeah.
There was something
Thank you, I
about
was trying to do the math.
there was something also about 90 days in the contract. I think that this was falling under that 90-day provision, actually.
Under 2.2, this agreement may be terminated by either party for cause if the other party shall breach any of the provisions of this agreement. Notice of breach shall be furnished to the breaching party in writing, and the breaching party shall have 90 days to correct that breach. That's the 90 days that you're talking about. My understanding is that the contract can be terminated upon 120 days notice at any point in time. The contract automatically renews upon January 1st of the new year.
Right.
And we always, when we wrote it, we felt that that's why the notice deadline is by October 1st, so that if we weren't in agreement with the amount we could terminate the contract and start negotiating over again.
And that would be in line with budget season, which makes sense.
Right. Any other questions or comment? Ms. Curler?
Yes, and maybe this, I guess, kind of follows up on Mrs. Bishop's question. So as I read the contract, it looks like there's another option, which would be under section 15.4, where any party can request to renegotiate. So that would not have a timeline associated with it, I suppose. So would that be, is that an alternative that you considered, and would that one be another option?
My opinion was, and from historic experience is that while you can request to negotiate, you are bound by the contract unless they are willing to renegotiate. So if there's no willingness to renegotiate, then you don't have anywhere to go. If you terminate the contract, then you are at a point where you can say, yeah, we don't have a contract at the end of the time period. We have the option of looking at other options. Whereas if you don't, then under the negotiation point, if they don't negotiate, you have no option but to renew the contract.
I guess one other question or thought that I had, sorry, just let me look at my notes here. In the contract under 11.1, it talks about a price increase and how the subsidy could be increased. And it, from the documentation that you shared with us, it looks like the past practice is that the Lake Mills EMS notifies us every year at some point of what they're going to be charging for the coming year. And I think that's where I saw maybe that October 1 date come into play. So if we don't take some action before October 1 to perhaps disagree with that increase, then that would automatically go into effect. Is that how it's been implemented?
Yes.
Okay.
That's how it's always been implemented. Even the last time we went to renegotiate, we terminated the contract. I think that was in 13. And then we started over again. And that would be similar here based on the conversations we had about renegotiating and the other options that go along with it. This would be the advice that we give. Otherwise, the negotiations are kind of one-sided.
All right. I wanted to comment that the EMS has played a pretty important role in the community and has done a fantastic job over the years. The past 8 years, we've seen about a 55% increase over that time period. And this year, we're experiencing the updated number of 126% increase in 1 year. So that does seem burdensome. And it seems like, you know, we need to review this as a community, make sure that we're servicing our citizens properly and giving them the right services, the proper services at a fair price. So it does seem fair to move forward with reviewing this further at this point. So, any other comments, questions? Steve?
Yeah, I'd just
Mr.
like
Fields?
to, for on the record, I'd like to just let everybody know that I am a member of the Lake Mills EMS, do volunteer in the service. Been an officer in the EMS and served as an interim president for a short period of time. So just wanted to let everybody know that I plan to abstain on this vote just because I'm a member of that service at this present time volunteering.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions?
I see that there's a few members in the audience that I suspect are representatives of the Lake Mills EMS, so I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules to allow representatives from the Lake Mills EMS to share their perspective with us before we decide.
I second.
Motion by Ms. Curler, second by Ms. Quidnow. Raise of hands in favor. Suspending the rules, that's 5-0. Did you guys want to address, now that the rules have been suspended, anyone want to address the council from the EMS? just state your name and where you live and your responsibilities within EMS. There's a microphone there. Can you hit that microphone? Thank you, Dave. It's on.
Okay. Sorry. I'm David Larsoul, the Service Director of Lake Mills EMS.
I'm Tom Murphy. I'm president of the EMS.
Basically, one of those to address any perspectives because they've also said correct. So I just want to make sure you know that. Basically, the reasons why the rates that you have seen have gone up is there has been a significant amount of volume of call that has taken place, especially in the last year. This city is not staying the same population-wise. It is growing, even though it's growing a little bit. There's still a lot more activity that is going on than ever. I've been on the service for at least 17, 18 years my own self. We've had a lot of second unit calls. We've had a lot of issues where we're having issues with covering what we need to in order to make this service run. So I just want to address that the moment you decide to start moving with somebody else, that personal relationship that you have with or for your citizens is going to be gone, because no matter whoever it is you call in to do it is going to be gone, because whatever they're going to do, they're just going to treat them as a number. And the one thing that you have right now is you've got a service that does have some empathy, some personality in how to deal with patient care. And to me, that makes a difference. I do think if you do go out and negotiate outside of it, I've been in this business for 34, 35 years as a private as well as a public entity on public services, that's going to be gone. And I just want to pretty much state that. I don't know.
The one thing I was going to point out here is we have had to change our business model somewhat over the last few years. It becomes harder and harder to find volunteers, as everyone here is very well aware. And so we've transitioned more to a paid on call. Up to about 5 years ago, we were entirely volunteer. So we've had to go to the paid on call to get enough people that we can continue to run the service. We are running at a pretty acceptable rate right at this point. We haven't had any problems manning our main rig. Very often have a second rig, and at times we've had a third rig out all at the same time. So due to this fact, we have to pay people more. We have to increase the rate somewhat nominally. Actually, if you take and look at what our average mix of paid on call, paid on premises, and that it ends up being about $17 per capita for us to man one ambulance for the year. And that's, so I just want people to understand what kind of a bargain this really is. And that we've worked hard to keep it reasonable. The prices were based more on a volunteer type of a business model. Now we're having to pay people, so the price has to go up somewhat. And we did not go as high as what even staffing one ambulance would require. So I don't know if anyone has any other questions for us. We'd be more than happy to try to answer anything you have.
And I also would like to add that we did a course with the state in this, and actually they said the amount per capita that we should be charging for this area is double what we're requesting. And I want to also remind you that we are the lowest in the county. So that's another reason why we needed to take some measures to move up, or else we would never be able to continue to function.
Yes, our job is to also keep the EMS a viable business. And that's so that we can keep going. And we hope you understand that and would approve this increase. Understand it's quite a bit, but it was very, very low for many years. And it was just time that we had to make a change. So I thank you for your time, and hopefully you will vote to approve the proposal we sent in. Thank you.
Is there any questions from the council for either Dave or Tom? Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
I had a
Oh, was there a
question.
question?
Yeah,
I didn't see that. Go ahead, Ms. Quitnell.
I have a question.
Sorry.
It's okay. Gentlemen, thank you again for everything that you do for our community. And I want to make sure that you hear that from somebody on the council, that other than your compatriot over here who is part of everything, we as a community are very, very grateful to have some people who live in our community and take care of our community the way that you do and the way that the volunteers do on a daily basis. I think it's important to know that we are going to consider everything that we can. I was wondering, one of the questions I had, and perhaps this is maybe a question for Steve, but I'm not sure, with the dramatic jump that we're making, and I know that we're talking about paid on call and we're talking about those types of things. I'm wondering if perhaps a more gradual change would be acceptable in this regard, because I don't want to say no when in fact there is a possibility for yes. So is it hard and fast that it needs to be this, or is there something that you'd be willing to discuss as a more gradual increase over time? And perhaps that's the point of the renegotiation.
We were talking about that before you
Okay.
walked in.
I apologize. I just was getting back from an ambulance call and I was trying to do a report. So I was a little bit late.
Is that microphone on?
Yes, it indicates
Okay.
it is.
All
Is
right,
that
thank
better?
you. Yeah.
Normally
You
people
just
don't have
moving
a
closer to
problem
the
hearing
microphone.
me. I guess that's something we can consider. The problem we've gotten into is we've let this ride for so long at such a low price that it does look like a very large jump. If we were to amortize back over to, I've been with the service for almost 19 years now. Over that 19 years, that's probably not much of an increase when you get right down to it. If you spread it over that, but it hasn't been coming up very much. We've just done literally nickels, dimes, and quarters over the years. So I guess that could be a possibility. We'd have to look at what the proposal would be. And that, again, as head of the board, I have to make sure that we have a viable business to provide the city. And that.
I completely understand what you're saying. I just wanted to put it on the record if that was something worth considering, but also wanted to thank you both and let you know that we do as a community very much appreciate what you do.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mhm.
So yeah, I guess the answer is somewhat yes.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
May I, while we get this?
Wait, hang on. Mrs. Bishop, was the question for them or you had just
It was
some
general
discussion?
comments.
Okay, go
Yes.
ahead.
Okay, so I recognize hearing that the increases beforehand have been nickels and dimes, and I recognize that the service we're getting is very cheap compared to what it would be if the city were to do it. So I think I agree with Michelle's approach that if there's any way to do a stepped up basis, that I'm seeing somebody can't hear me, I'll try to speak up. If there's any way to negotiate in terms of increasing the costs over time, 2 to 3 years, as opposed to the 114% increase right off the bat. But to my council members, you know, if we're looking at cost and something else has to go in the budget next year, what is that has to go? I can think of something that's $82,000 that we don't need next year, or we do need an EMS service. We do need something that is cost effective for our citizens. And so we may need to make a concession on another end somewhere. And I recognize we're getting really close to October 1st to renegotiate that percentage increase. So I'm just trying to think through it now. Is there any way to restructure this motion that would allow us the time up until October 1st to renegotiate and then give the city manager authority to terminate if that renegotiation doesn't happen at that point in time? So sort of flipping the motion on its head and doing it the other way, renegotiating first, and then if we can't get there, we terminate. Maybe that's the way to do it. I don't know if that's the best way, so that's why I wanted to bring it up to the council members tonight before we make a final decision and actually terminate this contract.
If I may, this is Dan. I'm very receptive to that. My concern is that the council does not meet again prior to or shortly after October 1st.
Yeah.
So if you're going to amend that motion, you have to put hard set dates and give clear direction as to what action you want from administration.
So would that be an amendment to the original motion? Okay.
Yes, that would be an amendment.
And I'm open for discussion on how to do that because I'm not sure right now how to word that.
Mr. Waters?
Yes.
I guess if I could ask Mrs. Bishop for a clarification on what you're proposing, and then I guess I'd also just like to share my thoughts on this motion. Are you proposing that in the next 9 days that there would be an opportunity for the city manager to talk with the Lake Mills EMS? Perhaps the Lake Mills EMS would reduce their dollar amount, and then if they did, we would not terminate the contract, but if they don't, then we will? Is that sort of the idea?
Correct. And to Mr. Drescher's point, we would have to say in an amendment, if there's no renegotiation in an agreement reached on the percentage increase by October 1, then in the same motion amendment authorizing the city manager to terminate the contract. If we agree here tonight that we don't want to pay the $90,000 increase, but that is in our budget as well if we cut other things. And I know we haven't had the full budget discussion yet, but that's something that we're going to have to think about.
I have a concern with this moving in this direction because that's basically having the council negotiate with EMS. And I think we need to be in a position where our city manager's negotiating with the EMS contract.
In what way do you see this as having the city council negotiate?
Well, we're basically deciding if we're going to void the contract based on a price that we may be getting from them in the next 9 days.
Well, it's our right to renegotiate the contract within the next 9 days, and I think we're directing the city manager to do that on his terms. I would trust that he'll do that to the best of his abilities.
So what you're saying is the city council is giving the city manager the authority to negotiate in the next 9 days without negotiating the contract, without voiding the contract.
Without voiding the contract, and if they cannot reach terms that they agree on between the city manager and EMS, then in the same motion, we're authorizing termination as of October 1. Instead of, currently our motion says we're terminating, now go forth and negotiate. That leaves us, with nothing, and then we're having to look at new costs to the city, startup costs, payroll, if we're to take that over. And I think, at least for the next year, there's room in the budget to absorb some of the costs. I don't know that we want to absorb all of them. This is me speaking. I'm not negotiating with EMS right now, but I think we should give the city manager a chance to do that in the next 9 days. Possibly.
I'd like to follow up on her point. I feel like terminating the contract makes it seem like we don't value And right now, I think what we're trying to appeal to, the idea is that we allow Steve to be able to have that discussion in more detail and see if something can be resolved from this so that we're not hard and fast cutting them off. We are going to get services all the way to January 1st. Should we file that termination? But I think it's important to do some actions that demonstrate our appreciation to the EMS that we have had for many years.
Mr. Waters.
Can I give Mr. Wilkie an opportunity to respond to that? Yes.
I don't think that what Catherine's proposed isn't a problem. She didn't propose terms. She just proposed timelines, which I'm comfortable with. So that would be fine. The one question I did have is you suggested $82,000, and I would be interested in knowing where that was located.
I may have gotten the number wrong, but I think there was about $80,000 for park, new park fill or whatever the bottom surface is. And, maybe that doesn't have to be done next year. And maybe we need to spend more time than just tonight looking at what do we really need if we were to change EMS services. I feel like it's a really rushed decision when we currently are getting very good value for our dollar.
Yeah, the $82,000 wouldn't transfer to this account. So it's in the capital one, and it wouldn't transfer into this one. So even if you eliminated that, you would not gain $82,000. You'd gain zero in this account. So that you'd have to search for something else, which there are some options, but I don't think it's that much. But I am comfortable with the terms that you proposed. It was kind of what I was planning to do anyways.
Ms. Curler?
Thank you, Mr. Waters. I guess I'd like to share some of my thoughts in response to this. First of all, I guess I'd like to echo my fellow council members in thanking the Lake Mills EMS for your many years of service to our community. I think I don't like the position that we're in tonight because this large dollar increase is coming as a bit of a surprise to us, but I'm surprised you haven't increased it before now. It seems like it's warranted. It seems like we've been getting, as someone said, a bargain for quite a long time. And it's really just the timing of and the size of the increase all in 1 year that I think is making it difficult for us to, but to be able to just work it into our budget conversations. It's just the sheer dollar amount in a 1 year change that I think is challenging. I don't like that we have to use the word termination in order to take this step. And what I would like to see us do, and I think there's more than one way to do this, but in this motion to recognize, my opinion would be that we want to continue to have a contract with Lake Mills EMS, that is our first choice. And so my personal feeling is that the motion is fine as is, other than that in section 2, I would maybe use the word directed rather than authorized, so that we're clearly saying Lake Mills EMS is our first choice. We want the city manager to negotiate with you and not to look for another option. So that's a little bit simpler approach. It doesn't give the opportunity for some negotiation before October 1, which I'm also open to. But I think if we don't, my understanding is if we don't terminate, then their requested dollar amount automatically goes into effect. And then that does force us to have to go and look for those extra dollars. I think, this is one of the most important services that we provide as a city to our community. And we have to pay what it takes to provide that quality that level of service and that quality of service. And obviously we've been getting a bargain for a while. So I think we're going to have to make some tough decisions during the budget.
Hey, Megan, can you print out about 7 copies of this motion and bring them in here?
Well, in that same light, I feel like it's important that what I'm hearing you say, Ms. Curler, is that we are amending not the entirety of this motion, but just a couple of pieces of it to change the language to make it more allowable for us to see our current service as the priority. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes, I think it's an alternative to what Mrs. Bishop proposed, and maybe they can both work. I'm not really sure, but it's just another way of thinking about it that still kind of gives a preference to Lake Missing Mass.
Do you have something?
I would actually like to call for a 10-minute recess because when Megan brings those documents in, I want to take pen to paper and add in a couple dates and make sure it reads appropriately before I move to make an amendment.
So is that a motion?
Motion for a recess?
Yes.
A second.
So it's a motion for recess, a 10-minute recess by Mrs. Bishop, and a second by Ms. Quidnow. Raise hands, all in favor. That's 5-0. It's currently 8:12. So we'll come back at, let's just call it at 8:25. All right, so after recessing, we're calling the meeting back to order here. And is there any further discussion on the item D, discussion decision on the EMS contract? We're talking motion 21-9-2-2. Mrs. Bishop.
Yes, I move to amend motion 21-9-2-2. Do you want me to say as follows, or do you want to vote on that first? I think I have to say everything we're doing. Okay.
Yep.
To amend as follows, strike section 1. Section 2 becomes the new section 1 and would read that the city manager and city attorney are directed to open negotiations with Lake Mills Emergency Medical Services on a new contract for the provision of emergency medical services within the city of Lake Mills, period. Strike the remainder. The next subparagraph becomes section 2 and would read, the city council does hereby authorize the city manager to notify Lake Mills Emergency Services, Inc. of contract termination if contract negotiations are not successful by 12:01 a.m. October 2nd. Period.
Mrs. Bishop, may I ask that you reread section 2, proposed section 2 again?
Yes, the subparagraph on the current motion would become the new section 2, and it would read, the city council does hereby authorize the city manager to notify Lake Mills Emergency Services, Inc. of contract termination if contract negotiations are not successful by 12:01 a.m. October 2nd.
(12:01 a.m. October 2nd?
Yes.
Okay, so there is a motion for amendment on the floor by Mrs. Bishop. Is there a second?
I second.
Motion to amend by Mrs. Bishop, second by Ms. Quidnow. So we're going to vote to accept this amendment, but do we vote to accept this amendment and then we have a vote to approve the amendment, correct?
As amended, the motion as amended.
Correct. So we need to approve the amendment and then we come back and we'll vote on the amendment. All right, everybody clear on that? All right, is there any discussion on this topic? Yes. Mrs. Curler.
Thank you, Mrs. Bishop and Attorney Drescher for working on that. I think that's a nice, clean approach. I guess just two thoughts I'd like to share. One is I think the current contract doesn't really have a very clear process for negotiating a price increase. It just kind of says it shall be done by October 1st every year. And so if we don't, as a city, don't get notified by the EMS until close to October 1, I don't want to be in this situation again. So I don't know that it needs to go in the motion or not, but I hope in these next 9 days or whatever, as Steve's negotiating, maybe a little bit more clarity in what that process is, could be, or at least perhaps that Lake Mills EMS could give us, you know, some certain amount of notice, 60 days notice or whatever of what their price will be for the next year. Something that just allows a little bit more time for these conversations. So I don't know, Catherine or Dan, if you think that any of that thread of thought needs to be added to the motion.
I think there are appropriate areas to renegotiate within the contract. The contract still does require the parties to negotiate in good faith. So I think that's the standard that we're under with regard to any negotiation efforts that we undertake. I agree with you with regard to the shortcomings of the contract in that specific area that could be clarified. I also think that the contract could have a little bit more teeth to it. With regard to defaults, there really isn't language with regard to what happens if parties fail to actually comply with the terms or perform in accordance with the terms. So the document as a living being, kind of breathing entity or contract itself could certainly be refined and brought up to a standard that we expect. And I think that's probably, you know, the most beneficial part of this conversation. Those efforts should not die regardless of how this specific motion to amend goes forward. I do agree with you, the contract should be refined. I am supportive, in my opinion, of the amendment that has been expressed right now. I don't know that you need to do any more to that amendment right now. We can still address these shortcomings that I perceive. It will be the first time that we've had the opportunity or been explicitly directed by the council to renegotiate this contract, and I think that's a good opportunity for both parties involved.
The one
Thank
thing
you.
I would like to make sure that we understand is that even if we terminate in the next 9 days, at the October deadline, I don't plan on ending negotiations until November 5th, when the budget has to be passed and we've had to make a decision one way or the other, right? So that I don't want to get the impression that October 1st is the end of it.
So Steve, let me make sure I understand what you just said, if I could try to rephrase it. I think what you're saying is you'll be negotiating on the price or the subsidy for the 2022 contract in the next 9 days. And if a resolution isn't agreed between the two parties, then you would notify Lake Mills EMS to terminate, and then you would still actively be working on negotiating a new contract for whenever that 120 days is up.
We have to make a decision at the November 5th meeting. So that'll be the day that I would say would be the drop dead date, because we have to pass the budget. So one way or the other, we got to figure out what we're doing. But up until November 5th, at 7 o'clock, I would be thinking we would be open to negotiations.
Was there any follow-up on that? All right, any other discussions? Seeing none, we are voting on the amended motion 21-9-2-2. Can I have a roll call?
Ms. Quednow?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Abstain.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Ms. Bishop?
Aye.
Motion passed 4-0 with Mr. Fields abstaining.
All right, thank you. All right, looks like you guys got some work to do. Good luck.
Yep, that was the motion to amend. So now
That was the motion to amend.
the motion is sitting as amended. I'd still like a vote on
I
that.
got ahead of myself. I apologize. Is there any discussion on this before we go to a vote? Seeing none. One more roll call, and this is for the amended motion 21-9-2-2.
Mr. Fields,
Abstain.
Ms. Curler. Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Aye.
Mr. Waters,
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop,
Aye.
Ms. Quedno.
Aye.
Motion passed 4-0 with Mr. Fields abstaining.
All right, thank you. All right, moving to the next item on our agenda. Item E is the discussion decision on Memorandum of Understanding, Hawkins Ash CPA for 2021, 2022, and 2023 auditing services. There is a motion. It's 21-9-2-3. Megan, can you read that motion? Just the title?
Motion 21-9-2-3, authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement between the City of Lake Mills and Hawkins Ash CPAs.
All right. Is there a discussion from staff? That'd probably be Betsy? Motion.
Yes.
Yes.
Can you hang on and we'll do see if there's a motion here and get that seconded?
I move to approve motion 21-9-2-3, authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement between the City of Lake Mills and Hawkins Ash CPAs.
I'll second.
Motion by Ms. Bishop, second by Ms. Quidnow. Now, is there a staff discussion here?
Sure, I can discuss the memorandum of understanding.
Thank you, Betsy.
We've used the Hawkins Ash CPAs for quite a number of years. I believe it goes back to 1994. We have a long-term relationship with them. They understand our finances. They've been very supportive and helpful when we have changes or have questions. I'd like to continue that relationship. We are expecting that we will be changing our bookkeeping system coming up shortly, and that would be very important to have a constant in there. Someone who understands our bookkeeping, understands our finances, so that they're able to look at what we're presenting as documentation and help us alert us to any discrepancies or variances that we need to be aware of, and also with their expertise to say these are the things you should be looking for when you're making these changes in a bookkeeping system. It's a huge undertaking to change a bookkeeping system, and it's not like we're really doing it willingly. The program that we're using now is going to be obsolete, and we won't be able to continue it. So it's very important that we do this under the best of circumstances. And so I'd really encourage that we continue using Hawkins Ash CPAs for that big reason in particular. Did you have any other questions? Or?
Is there any questions for Betsy or comments? Looks like we're good on that, Betsy. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, if there is no further discussion or questions, we'll move to a roll call vote on motion 21-9-2-3.
I didn't necessarily hear who the motioning member was. Was there a motion made?
Yes,
Excuse, who was it?
the motion was made by Mrs. Bishop and it was seconded by Ms. Quidnow.
Thank you very much.
All right, seeing none, let's have a roll call vote on motion 21-9-2-3.
Ms. Curler,
Aye.
Mr. Waters,
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop,
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow,
Aye.
Mr. Fields.
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
All right, thank you. So this moves us to Resolution 21-61, which is the county library tax exemption. Megan, can you read the title on that?
Resolution 2161, requesting exemption from county library tax.
All right, is there a motion?
I move to adopt, oh, sorry, did you have something? Was it a competition? Sorry. I move to adopt Resolution 21-61, requesting exemption from county library tax.
I'll second that.
So motion by Ms. Quidnow, second by Ms. Curler. Staff discussion on this?
It's the county charges a library tax, but for cities who levy a certain amount for library purposes are able to claim an exemption. We hit that. And so every year we file an exemption from the county tax. Probably a good idea. So I recommend that you approve this resolution.
Any comment or discussion? Seeing none, let's move to a roll call vote for Resolution 21-61.
Mr. Waters,
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop,
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow,
Aye.
Mr. Fields,
Aye.
Ms. Curler.
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
Thank you. All right, item G. This is the discussion decision on Sandy Beach Restaurant request for proposal. It's motion 21-9-2-4.
I
Can you
move
read
to,
Can you read the title of that motion, Megan?
Motion 21-9-2-4, authorizing the city manager to advertise a Sandy Beach restaurant, bar, concession, facilities development, and operations request for proposals.
All right, Mr. Fields, the floor is open.
I'd move to approve motion 21-9-2-4.
Is there a second?
I second.
Motion by Mr. Fields, second by Ms. Quidnow. Discussion from the staff. Can you give us some history on this?
Let's see. We talked about this in August in relationship to moving forward. We talked about having it ready at this time period. I didn't think I could make it, but I was able to modify an existing RFP that we had for food trucks. Between Dan and Dwayne and I, we were able to get it kicked out. I imagine it's still a little rough, but if you guys have any suggestions, we're willing to look at them, but it's up and ready to look at.
All right, is there any questions for staff? Yes, Ms. Curler.
Thank you for getting an initial draft to us so quickly. It maybe is a little rough in a few places, but that'll just give us a little more time to refine it. So thanks for getting something for us to look at, Steve. One question I had is the proposed schedule that's in there. Is that somewhat subject to change, or is that what you feel is a necessary schedule in order to have building construction starting in 2022?
The schedule is similar to what we run on our construction projects, but I don't think that would lead to construction at that timeline based on the types of proposals that you would be seeing. They're much more conceptual, leading to more detail. Once you get through the conceptual part, then and you select someone whose concept you like, then they really start working on the hard details, and they're more of a site plan, building site operations review rather than a concept of what type of restaurant and how it's going to be featured. So if you went through and you looked at it, and you'd see that they do provide us some elevations, they provide us narratives on what they're doing and some idea of the food they're going to serve and the price ranges that they're going to be in. But it's pretty general and overall. And then once you've kind of selected that concept, then that one selected bidder would then be asked to provide a lot more detail.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. And I guess my comment along those scheduling lines is that assuming we can give you our feedback and approve a final RFP before the end of this calendar year, I would think the schedule could start even a little bit earlier. But because it's sort of unique compared to maybe the typical construction contract, maybe allowing a little more time for applicants, to see it and put their projects together.
Yes, Ms. Quidnell.
In looking at this request for proposal documentation, I'm not seeing, and perhaps I'm not not seeing it on here. Is there any kind of language having to do with the business and whether it's going to be short-term or long-term, as in only for the summer months, or is it going to be all year round? Is that something that the business would then put in for their request or in for their proposal, or is that something that we should have in the language?
The language asks them to provide details on times that they're open, and their operational plans and how they would staff and how they would do that. So you would have the option of looking at someone who's seasonal versus someone who is year-round.
Okay.
And this should not restrict their desire to do either.
Thank you.
Ms. Bishop, did you have a question?
Yes, I do.
I thought I saw you waving your hand earlier. Go ahead.
Thank you. I was getting there. Section P, selection criteria, talks about the Lake Mills Park Division having the right to reject any and all proposals, and it says that a couple of times in that paragraph. So can you tell me how the selection process works with the Parks Division having that right, and then what trickles down to City Council afterwards for final approval?
Generally, what they do is they go through an analysis of the proposals, and then they thin them out to ones that are actually qualified, and then they would make recommendations on that. They would score them and send them up.
So that selection process, is that just making sure they're qualified in terms of they meet all of the criteria in the RFP, and then City Council gets everything else? Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Yes.
I notice here in section Q that there's a option of a selection committee, but I'm concerned about whether or not there would be enough time for that. Is that something you are considering, or is that something that is just in there as a option?
It's an option. Sometimes the council wants to set aside a group to review the proposals and make recommendations on them, which has happened in the past, but it's not a requirement. The last time we did this, we never set up the selection committee. It went from the parks to the city council.
Would this selection committee be made of people who are not part of city council or city staff? Or are we talking, who would be on the selection committee, for example?
Oh, let's see. The last one was made up of 3 city staff, a council member, a parks board member, and a couple members at large. And that was 17 years ago.
Good memory.
Wow. Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Bishop.
To Jason's question earlier, can you discuss how the RFP will be distributed to get the maximum amount and best types of developers to respond?
We generally work with our planning consultants and our engineers and a couple associations. And we also already have a pretty significant group of people who've asked to be on the list. So, and then we're required to advertise in the newspapers, so we'll do that too.
Based on the timelines we're seeing here, are you expecting this would be a summer of 2023 opening date? Is that your projection?
The budget timeline gives us an opportunity based on the type of proposal that we accept to allow for a 22 construction timeline, but maybe a 23 depending on what the proposals are. So if you decide to accept one that has more city involvement in it and there are certain features of it that I'm going to tell you, government moves slow, and with a new city manager, it's going to move slower for a while. So I would anticipate that the best option would be if they make a proposal where they build it all and they just lease the ground from us. That could probably be done in 22 by the end of the year. Anything else, you're going to be 23 at the earliest.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Fields?
Just on the construction end of it, even to get it done, if they did it, by the time they got permits, construction, especially restaurant equipment, stuff like that, the lead times are incredible right now. Just to get anything done next year is going to be a big challenge. Personally, I would say I'd plan on almost a 23 for finished construction, even if they got going fairly quickly.
Yeah, and that was based on historic, next year could be a totally out of the box type of year.
Yes, Ms. Curler.
Just one other comment. A couple of places in the RFP, it asks the applicant to provide information about their menu and their pricing. And I felt like some of that language was maybe a little bit too onerous. Like, I don't need to see their precise menu and exact prices, or I don't think we need to see that, but if we can have an idea, is this going to be fine dining? What's maybe some examples of what's on their menu and their general price range, or if it's just going to be a food truck and, burgers and hot dogs or whatever. So anyway, just thinking they're trying to make it a little simpler, not trying to expect the applicant to commit to an exact menu and prices, I think might be helpful for them.
We thought about, and I guess I shouldn't say I thought about the fact that if you're looking at a family restaurant style, that's kind of defined by the menu. And so you would want to get a feel for at least the basic menu when you are qualifying it as a family style restaurant. And so that's why I went that route.
All right.
Lisa, you don't want to know if a food truck is going to charge $32 for a burger? I want to know. Just wondering.
Depends on what's on it.
It better be a big,
You want to know, don't you?
it better be a big burger for that one.
It's a 5-pounder.
Maybe
No.
includes lobster?
Okay, that's a
And an
burger I want.
ambulance. And an ambulance.
I do like the idea of keeping things as generic as possible. Hopefully we see a ton of different proposals. I think, our constituents, the people out in the community are the ones with the great ideas, and we just need to work with them to get the right fit for down at Sandy Beach.
All right. Any other comments or questions? Are we going to end it on that nice summary?
I would like to make a motion that we table this item until the second meeting in October to give Steve an opportunity to refine it a little more and reflect on some of our comments, and we can start working on the budget, and then have him bring it back to us again the second meeting in October. So that's my motion.
I have a clarification question. Would that be that we need to amend the current motion as it's written?
No,
Okay. Well, with her saying that,
That was a motion to table, the current motion.
There's a motion to table.
yeah. Okay.
And that supersedes the other motion. It just sets it off to the side till we bring it off the table again.
Right. No, I got that. It was the verbiage having to do with clarifying on, or cleaning it up. So I didn't know if we wanted to actually help him clean it up or if he's going to clean it up.
Well, let me maybe clarify.
Under-
My understanding, if I'm asking a table, and the council votes for that, that'll come back in 2 meetings, and Steve can bring us an updated version, or he can bring us the same version.
Okay.
So there is a motion to table on the floor. Is there a second? All right, hearing none, we'll move on.
Okay.
Any other discussion on motion 21-9-2-4? Seeing no further discussion, I would ask for a roll call vote.
Mrs. Bishop,
Aye.
Ms. Quidnell,
Aye.
Mr. Fields,
Aye.
Ms. Curler,
Aye.
Mr. Waters.
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
All right, thank you, Megan. Thanks for filling in today, Megan. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right, so that ends the council business. So we move to item 10, which is recommendations for future agenda. Is there any recommendations? Going once, going twice. Moving on. That brings me to adjournment. It is now 8:55 and this meeting's adjourned. Thank you.